So welcome to today's webinar on equitable enrollment. I'm Christy Merrick. I'm the director of the Natural Start Alliance. And today's conversation is a continuation of a conversation that we started last year with Fiddleheads Forest School in Seattle. At that time, Sarah Heller was working with the organization, and she joined us to talk about a new approach to enrollment that they were working on to try to diversify their program and make sure that families who stood to gain the most from the program had a better shot at getting a spot. Fiddleheads was in a position that many nature-based programs are in, where there are more families interested in the program than spots available. And in our most recent survey of nature preschools, we found that that continues to be the case today. 3/4 of nature-based programs are maintaining waitlists. So it's a really important question that when there's a lot of demand for a program, how do we ensure that the process of filling those spots is equitable? We know that children of color are underrepresented in nature-based programs. This is also data from that most recent survey. And the same goes for teachers. There's the same pattern of overrepresentation of white teachers in programs. So we thought this would be a really good time to check back in with Fiddleheads to see how things have evolved with the weighted system that they developed, what's working and not working, what they're learning. And we put this question out to the Natural Start Google group to see what else programs we're thinking about, who else is really grappling with this, coming up with new strategies. And we reached out to several programs that had been really thinking a lot about this to see if they'd also share, just to help broaden our perspective and our thinking around what we can do. And then when you registered for this webinar, we also asked you what your questions are, and you can see that there are a lot around all kinds of aspects of enrollment. So we know that this is a conversation that we just need to keep having. We'll hear from Maddie Cole. She's the head of school for Fiddleheads Forest School, like I said, to fill us in on kind of the latest with their approaches. We'll also hear from Sarah Bessie. She's the co-founder and executive director of the Boston Outdoor Preschool Network, and Paige McKay Kubik, who is the CEO of the Frazer Center. Just want to emphasize that they're not here to give us all of the answers by any means, but really, like I said, to just keep continuing this conversation, keep thinking as we all continue to adapt and try new things as we're trying to tackle these big issues. So as we go along, please do feel free to add any comments to the chat, any questions as we go along. If we have time at the end, I'll come back on and I can pull some questions from the chat to put to our panelists. So feel free to pop them in there. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Maddie, and thank you so much for being here.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. So I am Maddie Cole. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been the head of Fiddleheads Forest School since June of 2021. Fiddleheads is an entirely outdoor preschool located in Seattle. We are at the Washington Park Arboretum, which is jointly run by the City of Seattle and the University of Washington Botanic Gardens. It's very exciting for me to hear from the other presenters and to share with you what the Fiddleheads weighted lottery looks like and a little bit of how it has evolved. And I do have a variety of links in my slides. I will also share those just in the chat at the end. So, of course, we want to start off with the land acknowledgement today. So we aim to include a piece of news or action with all of our land acknowledgements as well. So as we teach and learn and grow together as a community here at Fiddleheads, we carry with us the understanding that the ground that we walk upon is the ancestral home of the Suquamish, the Tulalip, the Muckleshoot, and the Duwamish nations, and we honor their connection and hereditary rights to the land. I'm including here a link to 6, I believe these are all U.S. organizations that are Indigenous-led, who are working towards environmental concerns and conservation. So that might be something that you can connect with either professionally or just personally as we all strive for these goals together and to include representation in all that we do. One piece that I'm going to speak about today regarding the weighted lottery at Fiddleheads is this Racial and Social Equity Index. So before I introduce the lottery, I want to explain a little bit about what this is. So the sentence you see here is just straight from the website description. So the Racial and Social Equity Index combines information on race, ethnicity, and related demographics with data on socioeconomic and health disadvantages to identify where priority populations make up relatively large portions of neighborhood residents. So you can see here on this map of Seattle that each neighborhood has been surveyed and color-coded within 5 categories. So those sort of darker blue, green category is the lowest and the second lowest priority. So that means that that actually has the lowest number of people who are disadvantaged according to these criteria. So the sort of orange and purple neighborhoods are those that have the highest percentage of residents who are disadvantaged. So they are the ones who are going to get a little bit of extra priority in our weighted lottery. And I'll explain a little bit more about how those go in just a moment. I also wanted to add here, I have a link underneath that little sentence on the left to what seems to be a national race and equity index. I have not looked at it a lot. It hasn't been something that I've had to use, but it does seem to have similar data on a number of cities. So I just want to make sure that that is out there for you all. I'll put the link in the chat later. So if you happen to be in one of those cities that has been surveyed for something like this, you may be able to get similar data for your area as well. So this is going to start with the original weighted lottery. The original weighted lottery had a different format and also a few different criteria. So I'm going to start with this one. So this was first used for the 2021-2022 school year. As was mentioned at the beginning, there is another presentation on this on the Natural Start website. I also have a link to it at the end of the slides as well, but it was that QR code a whole hour on the way that this was developed and what sort of legal requirements the former heads of school looked into. For instance, we can't just straight enroll someone based on race or not. So just looking at, well, what ways can we reach out and give priority weight to disadvantaged families? So this original lottery, let's see here, had a few different steps to it. So information was gathered in Google Forms, which all the families submitted, and then that was exported to a Google spreadsheet that only the heads of school could access. When they were actually sitting down to run the lottery after it had been open, we usually open it for about a week for families to apply. So after families had applied for that initial lottery, each child was given their own number just based on the row that they were in the spreadsheet. So that's pretty straightforward. And then each child's, assuming they lived in the Seattle area, each child's zip code was entered into that Racial and Social Equity Index so they could be categorized to find out which children had those priority neighborhoods. And then to start off with the weighted lottery, the heads of school took that original, so they took all of the children who met a variety of criteria. I'll go into a little bit of it right now as well. So the Social Racial Equity Index, if they were higher priority, if they had a referral, for instance, from an occupational therapist or from a physical therapist or a pediatrician for outdoor school, or if they were applying for financial aid or some subsidy. This was just as we were getting going, so it wasn't as well known that we had subsidy connections. So that was a smaller piece of the original lottery. But so any children who met that criteria were transferred into a completely separate spreadsheet. And so just from that spreadsheet, just those children who met one or more of those criteria, the heads of school offered approximately 20% of our open spots to those students first. And then they went back to the original spreadsheet that had just everybody. And I have an example here. So on that main spreadsheet, they still wanted to give some weight to the children in the lottery as they ran a random number generator. So an easy way to think of this is essentially it's a raffle, but some children are handed more tickets. So in this example here, you see child A had highest priority neighborhood category for the racial equity index. And also it says they had a referral. So then in 2 separate below categories, child A appears 2 more times. So essentially that's just giving a little bit of weight to them in the full lottery, so that they have numbers 3, number 7, and numbers 10 in that random number generator. If you haven't used a random number generator before, you can just type one into Google and they will appear for you. And it's quite easy to just get a random number to be generated for that. So there are a few updates in our new weighted lottery. So we have had just a far larger portion of people who know now that we are accepting subsidies and who are applying for that. So part of that has just been us connecting with early achievers and some other programs to put us on their general website. So it doesn't have to be someone who's just searching for nature preschools. It can be someone who's just looking for preschools in general and who may not have heard of us in other ways. So they're finding us in that way. And then I've also had some schedule changes, some different options. So we've added an early care that children can select anywhere from 1 to 5 set days per week to join. We've piloted an afternoon late care this year, which we're hoping to expand next year as well. And when children are applying for those, they can pick not apply. But if they are applying for them, then we ask them to rank their need for these extra hours. So high, medium, or low need. So in that way, I can also prioritize families who are saying that they have the higher need for that extra childcare. So that not only, of course, fills those extra time slots that we are staffing, but it makes sure that the families who have the highest need for that service are getting offered the option first. So I do want to show, I love this particular picture as we're talking about weight and weighted lotteries, just experimenting with balance there a little bit. It's a little hard to tell with the similar colors there, but they are on a large teeter-totter and have well balanced themselves against a large pile of logs. So the format for our new weighted lottery, when I was onboarded, the entire Botanic Gardens was switching over to a system called Ideal Logic that handles all of its registration. So I do have a link to that at the end of the chat as well. I have no experience particularly searching for different kinds of databases like that, but this is the one that was selected and that we have used. When I run the lottery, so again, everyone's information is entered into this registration database. I still go through and type everyone's zip code into that social and racial equity index, and then assign them a category so that I can prioritize those folks who have the highest priority need. And then instead of using spreadsheets, this particular registration system lets me filter. So I can start by filtering out folks, or filtering just to folks who, again, meet the highest priority on the index, who have a referral from someone like an occupational therapist or a pediatrician, someone who's looking for financial or subsidy needs, and someone who needs that aftercare and early care. So just to help you visualize this a little bit. So with the redacted information, of course, I have been able to filter this particular search down to, yes, children who are looking for subsidies, children, whether or not they've applied for early care. And then I'm also able to filter it by age. So Fiddleheads has mixed age classrooms. So sometimes we're already skewed toward the 4s and 5s. So I'm only looking for a 3-year-old, etc. So I can start with these, filter down to certain categories that I'm looking for, run a much smaller random number generator from that. And then when I have assigned out about 20 offers, or excuse me, 20% of our spots out as offers, then I can pull back and do more of the lottery in general. And still looking to give a little bit of priority. If it's, you know, between a couple of folks, then I will try to give the priority to folks who have the weight. So as I wrap up here, I wanted to just add a few more things. So this is something that, as you can probably tell, took a lot of time to develop and to evolve. And it's very important to us at Fiddleheads to make sure that this is working and constantly being reevaluated. So if you are looking to start something like this on your own, I want to add a few things to make sure that you know the proper commitments that go into it and are really prepared for it. So the timing is important. So please know that subsidy families may have to apply for the subsidies. That is a little bit of a process. So just know and plan for that time in advance. We also recommend holding a few spots, either for families who maybe didn't have stability in the spring and are now able to commit in the summer months, or perhaps have a bunch of questions surrounding perhaps physical access to the bathrooms if their child has some physical restrictions. So just really making sure that you have the time planned out to support those families as they are making that choice. Reevaluation is always important. So for instance, the original lottery, I believe the heads of school were mostly focused on referrals just from occupational therapists or physical therapists, but those families who have that referral may already be in a place where they have a lot of resources, which is good. And I'm glad that they have that. It's not a bad thing, but it does mean that families who don't have those resources may not have that referral yet. So also just taking a referral from teachers, perhaps, to get that sense of who would benefit most from an outdoor school. And then, of course, just a reminder that anytime you are aiming to onboard more marginalized and disadvantaged communities, there is just that extra level of support that you need to commit to. So for instance, if we have a family that has a known trauma or a child that has a diagnosis of some sort, we will often invite them to their own private 20-minute tour so they can see the space in a way that's a little bit less overwhelming. And then it is a big commitment to everything from extra teacher training to diversity of your staff. And of course, we are all working to diversify our field in general. So thank you so much. I have resources at the end here that I will again post into the chat. And I'm going to say thank you so much and turn it over to Sarah Bessie.
Thanks again, Maddie, for getting us started. I'm the Executive Director of Boston Outdoor Preschool Network, Sarah Bessie, and I'll be talking today about both our tuition-based programs and also our programs that do not rely on tuition. So we have, I don't know, I didn't know whether to call it a vision or more like a dream to make nature-based early education accessible to all families, regardless of socioeconomic status. I think for us, the challenge is to find the time and energy to do this social justice work, in addition to doing all the regular things we need to do to sustain our programs, like admissions and enrollment and operations and logistics. So we're in the process of expanding our tuition-free equity programs. And once that happens, we want to be regarded as a true nonprofit organization rather than as a private preschool. So when I first started Boppin in 2019, together with my co-founders, Sarah Murray and Shayla, all of our revenue was from tuition. So we are currently in the process of trying to diversify our revenue by bringing in government funding, foundation grants, and individual donations specifically for our tuition-free programs. So diversifying our funding stream will really help us accomplish these equity goals. So most of our programs, as I mentioned, are tuition-based, and we set our tuition rates as high as we possibly can, as high as the market will bear, so that we can then redistribute wealth from our full pay families to our families who need financial aid. So charging high tuition to our wealthiest full pay families allows us to have 30% of families on partial or full financial aid, anywhere from 10% to 100% of the cost covered. A lot of colleges and universities use the same strategy of having a very high sticker price with a lot of students on financial aid. So if a family calls me and says, "Hey, why are you charging such high tuition?" my response will be, because we're essentially redistributing wealth. Now, honestly, maybe this is the job of the government, but that's a conversation for later. So right now I want to talk a little bit about our tuition-free programs. So one of our tuition-free programs is our public school partnership. So we take children outdoors to play and learn in nature from a local public school once a week. And we're very lucky that this school just happens to be walking distance to the beautiful Arnold Arboretum, so we don't have to worry about busing. Last year, this program was funded by federal COVID relief money that filtered down to public schools. And this year, the program is funded by a combination of Commonwealth Corps, which is similar to AmeriCorps, and also a grant from a family foundation. Now, the challenge with this program moving forward is that each year we're going to need to reapply for grants in order to sustain the partnership. So hopefully we'll be successful at getting some of the same grants as we did last year and also applying for new grants just in case. So we're currently in the process of launching a tuition-free program at the Franklin Park Zoo in September. And this program will be funded mostly by the City of Boston's Universal Pre-K. So over the next couple of years, we will have an increasing percentage of children across Boppen who attend tuition-free, and also an increasing percentage of our revenue coming from the City of Boston. So if you're in an area that offers universal pre-K, definitely try to tap into that. And if you're not, then perhaps you can help to advocate to bring universal pre-K to your city or town if that's at all possible. So just to wrap things up here, how we fund our equity work. So scholarships for children in our tuition-based programs is mainly just from redistributing the wealth from the full pay families to the families who need scholarships. We do have a little bit of revenue also coming from donations to our annual scholarship fundraiser. In terms of our Forest Days program, which is our public school partnership, as I mentioned before, that was covered by a government grant 2 years ago, and then it was covered by Commonwealth Corps, which is similar to AmeriCorps, and a Family Foundation grant for this year. And then in the future, hopefully we'll continue to get grants for that program. And then Universal Pre-K is really one of our most exciting initiatives. We're super, super happy to partner with the City of Boston and also the Franklin Park Zoo to provide full day preschool tuition free, funded mostly by the City of Boston and supplemented a little bit with outside donations or grants to help cover that gap between the 2 staff members that they expect preschools to have and the 4 staff members that we would need to run a safe nature-based program. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks so much. Handing it over here to Paige.
So I'm Paige McKay-Kubik. I am with the Frazer Center in Atlanta. Just to give you a little background, I have been working in early education in Atlanta for about 35 years now, and have worked with lots of different kinds of programs, but including those serving families with limited income, children with disabilities, children experiencing homelessness, and a variety of funding streams, Head Start, Early Head Start, pre-K. But today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Frazer Center where I currently am. Let me see if I can move this up here so I can get. All right. So Frazer Center is, I think one of the things that sets us apart, that makes us a little bit different, is that we started out in a very different way. We've been around for 75 years. We were founded in 1949 as a school for children with cerebral palsy. And the program has changed over the years. We actually have, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we have 2 programs that we operate. One is a program for adults with intellectual disabilities, helping them find employment and otherwise being meaningfully engaged in the community. And the other one is an inclusive early education program, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. As I said, we started out as a school for children with cerebral palsy. We now are inclusive and serve children of all abilities in one program. And that program started in 1992. So the core of our mission has always been inclusion. It started as inclusion for children with disabilities. That's still at the heart of our mission. But we have really kind of taken that to heart as meaning inclusion of all people from all backgrounds, and with all kinds of gifts that they can contribute to the community. So what makes us a little bit different is that we were an established early education licensed, accredited preschool program before we layered nature-based on top of what we were doing. And so we've kind of come at it a little differently than a lot of programs that are starting out as nature-based full-time out in the forest preschool, and states now looking at licensing. We did the opposite. We were licensed first and have layered this on. One of the great resources we have here, Atlanta is known as the city in the forest because we have a beautiful tree canopy, and we are located, our campus is on a historic estate that includes the 39-acre old-growth forest. So when I came on board 10 years ago, I said, this is something we need to be really leveraging as a learning opportunity for our children. And so we started in earnest down the path of including nature-based learning in our curriculum. So just to give you a quick overview of what our children's program looks like now, we are full day, full year childcare and early learning. So we are open from 7 in the morning till 5:30 in the afternoon every day, all year long, except for holiday breaks. We serve children in ages 0 to 5 in that program, and then we have a summer camp for children 5 to 8. As I mentioned, we are a Georgia licensed childcare center, and have been, for many decades now, and quality rated, which is Georgia's quality rating for early childhood programs. We are not quite at where our enrollment was before the pandemic, just because we've been rebuilding staffing, but generally we're getting close, and generally we have about 189 children enrolled. And the heart of our program is that it's inclusive. So that's one of the ways we are already trying to reach out to some underserved populations, because that was our mission. Usually about 20 to 30% of the children that we serve have a diagnosed disability or are experiencing developmental delays and are looking for answers and therapies around that. And about 80% of our children are typically developing. And we are very intentional about them learning together, both indoors and outdoors. We have the way we support the children with disabilities to be fully included in our program. We have inclusion coaches on our staff who are kind of they keep everybody connected, so that a child, whether they're in therapy or in class or at home, they are getting all the same reinforcement and messages from the adults in their lives, and then make sure that all those services are getting linked, and support our teachers on strategies to make sure children with disabilities are fully included in the classroom, and that children who are typically developing are learning how to be inclusive. The therapies are provided on site at Frazer Center, embedded into the program. And then there's what I'm going to talk about today is our nature-based curriculum. So we started down this road several years ago of developing a nature-based curriculum. One of the things that we were finding is that we were having a hard time finding something that was geared toward very young children, the children that we serve. And we also wanted something that layered on to the creative curriculum that we already were using and use as a Georgia pre-K program. So we got a grant and partnered with Georgia State University here in Atlanta to develop a nature-based curriculum that gets our children out into the forest and really exploring that as a classroom every day. This is just very quickly about our inclusion program. When we talk about it, we're not just talking about the children who have disabilities being included. We are talking about the children who are typically developing, also finding ways to be connected with their classmates in really meaningful ways. That it's not just that we've got 20% of the children in the room have a disability, but that they are fully included and learning alongside their typical peers. And the things that we look at are access, participation, supports, and collaboration. Those are the kinds of ways we measure to make sure true inclusion is happening, and it's not just a head count of who's in the room. We get referrals from in Georgia, it's Babies Can't Wait, the early intervention program, from physicians, therapists, families, other service providers. For children with disabilities, they do get preferred status on our wait list. But then there is a matchmaking process as well, because, for example, a child, we've had children before with Down syndrome who need very little support. They need a few adaptations in the classroom, but they jump in with both feet and are very engaged. And then we've had some children who had other needs where they needed a lot more support. And so so we kind of look at the composition of the classroom and match that up with the children with disabilities who are coming to us to make sure we can fully support those children and give them a great learning experience and a truly inclusive experience. So how we make this available to children from all different backgrounds. Like I said, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We have been since 1950 or 51. And we are a licensed child care center. So that has made us eligible for things like child care subsidies and the state pre-K program. So we have both of those that we are able to leverage for families to make our services more affordable. The child care subsidies, of course, being needs-based. In Georgia, the pre-K is it's funded through our lottery. Technically, it's a universal pre-K, meaning any child is eligible in Georgia at 4, but there aren't enough spaces to serve every 4-year-old in Georgia. So it still is a bit of a lottery to get into that. And then we offer financial aid, and we have done that through a lot of different sources. We used to get a good deal of United Way funding for financial aid. One of the problems, they have kind of one of the problems that we've had with continuing that is the number of children that we serve. A lot of times, because financial aid is an expensive thing for a philanthropist to fund, they'll look for large programs that are serving large numbers of children, and the financial aid will go there. For a standalone program like ours, where a percentage of our children are qualifying for financial aid, we may not be as much bang for the buck. So sometimes it's a little hard to get those philanthropic resources, but we have in the past gotten grants for financial aid, gotten some United Way support for financial aid, some support through our local county government for financial aid. So we have had that. But one of the things we've done to try to sustain it is we call it the Flourish Fund. We've created a fund that we solicit designated gifts from our supporters to help fund that scholarship fund. And luckily, we have worked very hard over our 75-year history to be a good steward of resources that are donated to us, and we have built some endowment funding, and that is earmarked. What we earn from that endowment is earmarked for financial aid. So those are some of the ways that we're making our services available to all children, regardless of their family's ability to pay. Some of the considerations that we've had in becoming more diverse, one is transportation. We are located just a couple of miles from downtown Atlanta, but we are located in a neighborhood that is actually fairly well-to-do, and fortunately we are on public transportation, and so we have that, but it's still, Atlanta traffic is kind of legendary, and even on public transportation on the buses it can take a while. So that's something that we have to work really hard to overcome, to be attractive to families who don't live in the neighborhood and who don't have the resources to have their own transportation. And our location has been a hindrance. It's historically our location. We've been here for 75 years, but the neighborhoods around us have changed over that time, and so making ourselves accessible to people from other zip codes that may not have the same resources as families that live near us has been one of our challenges. But some of the things that we've done to try to address that is very intentional outreach, instead of just general marketing, really being strategic and thinking about how we can connect with underserved communities. Making sure our staff and our leadership are representative of the diversity of Atlanta. Whenever we recruit our board, one of the things we're looking for is to make sure that it is very diverse, kind of in every way, including racial, ethnic diversity. but also, diversity as far as reflecting all the different constituents that we support. And then looking for partnerships and finding ways that we can increase our diversity by partnering with others. And I'm going to give you a few examples of that here. This first one, Our House, is a program, a nonprofit also here in Atlanta. It's a few miles down the road from us. And they serve families who are experiencing homelessness and provide early childhood education and childcare for those families. So we have partnered with them, and the curriculum that we developed with Georgia State, we have provided free of charge. They also are a nonprofit, so we've provided them the curriculum that we've developed free of charge. We have done training with their teachers on how to use the curriculum. We've offered them opportunities for field trips to come here and experience the forest that we have here on our property, along with children enrolled in our program. And then we've also helped them to find green spaces around the centers that they have in Atlanta where they can use this curriculum in their own backyard. So that's one of the ways that we've reached beyond the children that are enrolled in our program every day by serving children through other nonprofits and partnering with them. Then this is something unique that we started about 2 years ago. We started a partnership with another nonprofit called the Refugee Women's Network. And part of this was in response to the early childhood hiring crisis and trying to find good staff. So basic, without going into a lot of detail, basically, Refugee Women's Network helps us identify women in the refugee community in Atlanta who are looking for career opportunities. They kind of do the initial screening, help connect us with these women. And then we have a cohort model. We currently have our third cohort in training. They do a 3-month paid internship. The first 2 internships we paid for largely through pandemic relief funding. This third, we've gotten a lot of philanthropic interest in it, and so it's mainly being funded through philanthropic support. But the cohorts and the cohort, so far we've had about 26 women go through. So each cohort is 6 to 8 women. They spend 3 months, 40 hours a week in our program at the Frazer Center. During that time, it's front loaded. At the beginning, they're doing a lot of training. They do all the training for the Child Development Associate credential. They do the training for Georgia licensing. They do training about our forest curriculum, about our inclusion practices. They also have ESL training that's geared toward early childhood. And gradually, as they're getting through that training, they spend more and more time in the classrooms doing observation, and then eventually actually hands-on working in the classrooms. And then at the end of the 3 months, the goal is, if they've had a good experience, if we've had a good experience, they come on to our staff at a full-time permanent rate. There's an hourly rate at the internship rate, and then when they become a full-time staff, they get bumped up to the starting rate for permanent employees, and the clock starts ticking on benefits from day 1 of their internship. So when they're 3 months toward eligibility for all their benefits when they're hired. And we also work very hard to find financial aid so that we can enroll their children here. So to show you kind of what has happened since we did this, first of all, the teacher retention has been amazing. The people who have been through this program, after a year, the retention rates are so much higher for us than in the past. But it has incredibly increased the diversity of our teaching staff. We've gone, at this point, 30% of our current teaching staff are program graduates. Now, we always had a lot of diversity in terms of Black, white, and a few Hispanic folks, but nothing like what we have now. You can see, all the different countries, all the different languages that are part of who we are now. Obviously, a lot of diversity of lived experience working with people who've come through the refugee experience. And it's greatly increased the diversity of the children that we serve because their children have come with them and enrolled in the program. So it has been a huge boost to us in terms of the diversity of the people that we serve and of our staff. And I'm going to mention one other partnership, and then I'll wrap up. One of the other partnerships that we did that helped us with this is in Atlanta. It's the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, and they were offering free training for nonprofits in Atlanta around issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we were able to help with becoming so diverse so quickly with so many different languages and cultures. There was a lot of work we needed to do with our staff to help them understand, communication issues and learning across cultures. And so we were very fortunate to partner with National Center for Civil and Human Rights to come and do a lot of that cultural competency building for our staff. This is just one thing that they shared with us in that training that we loved, this will of power and privilege. I think it really helped our staff to understand a little better, when all of a sudden we had a lot of staff people coming in who were from different countries and different language groups and different lived experiences and different religions. And for our folks who, were born and raised in the United States and had never been through that, there was a lot of understanding that we all needed to grasp. And this was one of the things that I think helped people begin to understand one another and kind of communicate across, is realizing how, all the intersectionality of all the different ways that we as human beings are diverse, and that most of us, at sometimes there's something in our identity that puts us closer to the center of power, and there's something in our identity that sends us further out to the edges. And this was a great conversation starter for our staff as we became more diverse and started trying to find ways to talk to one another and make connections across those various new borders we were crossing together. So that is us. I will stop now, and I think we'll be handing it back over to Christy at this point for Q&A. So
thank you so much, all three of you. That was just really fantastic. What a nice deep dive into some of your thinking around, what this can look like. What are some of the specific strategies that we can use? Just really, really appreciate how much thinking has gone into this for you all. There have been lots and lots of questions in the chat, and Maddie, a lot of questions about some of the specifics around the Fiddleheads approach. I don't know if you want to scroll back up in those questions. You could take a look and see if there's any that you feel like you might be able to tackle quickly. But I just noticed something that I just want to throw out before we get to some of these questions, is that, well, two things. One, it seems like partnerships have been really valuable to you in thinking, about your approaches, and in thinking in particular about staffing. It seemed like that was interesting that came up a couple of times too. So I just wondered if anyone had any thoughts just broadly about the sort of power of these partnerships.
Happy to jump in here. We have partnerships with Boston University. We get practicum students from them. We also have student workers from Mass Art, which is a public school of art and design in Boston. We applied to Commonwealth Corps last year, which is similar to AmeriCorps. It's just a little bit scaled down with fewer members. And that was incredibly helpful because our 2 Commonwealth Corps members are running our public school partnership. So that's how we afford to have the public school partnership, right? And just any opportunities to partner with an organization that can help with staffing, that can help bring in more low-income families. I mean, really, it's just keeping an eye out in all of your spare time, right? Keeping an eye out for potential partnerships and just reaching out of the blue and saying, hi, my name is Sarah. I work at Boffin. I'd love to explore the possibility of collaborating with you. It's not easy to do that, but just put yourself out there and say, maybe they might be interested in responding. And, like here's there's a university like half a mile away. I reached out to them probably every 6 months for 2 years. And then finally I got the right person who was like, yeah, let's go for this. And then all of a sudden we have this research project and so persistence, I think, is probably the thing that has got me the furthest in my career, just never giving up. And keep, just saying, okay, the goal is to make these programs more accessible, more equitable. What am I going to do right now in the next hour to make that happen?
And Maddie, I think that you also have some partnerships around, and I feel like we heard years ago from Fiddleheads about some innovations that you were having around student teachers.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I did put the links from my slide in the chat. I didn't want to do it as other folks were presenting, but those are there now. So we have a number of them. A lot of them were paused right before I began under the pandemic. And so it's been a little bit of a slower process to bring them back. We are part of the University of Washington Botanic Gardens. And so we are connected to the university. So we get pretty consistent interest for volunteering and internships from environmental education students, which is really great. We've also been trying to partner as much as possible with early childhood education students. I know that there are studies that show that environmental education is still a little bit, skewed towards white folks, and so trying to make sure that we are reaching a lot of diverse colleges is very important, and our early childhood educator students tend to come from slightly more diverse backgrounds, so trying to get both of those in there. We also, in the last few years, have been partnering with a program called Yes To, that had originally partnered with our summer camps at the Botanic Gardens. And they bring in high school students who have vision impairments, and they come for 5 weeks and they live at a house together and they do a lot of things. But part of it is coming to us 4 days a week and volunteering with us. So yeah, just anything that you can do to bring in those folks is really great. We've also recently reached out to the occupational therapy department at University of Washington, and they're going to come send their students for a sort of observation this spring and hopefully build some internship stuff there. Unfortunately, we ourselves do not have an occupational therapist on staff, so it makes it harder to form an internship program, but perhaps planting this seed of how important nature can be for children who have additional needs is going to be a starting point for that.
The other thing I would just add with partnerships is, if the partnership is coming with funding, it's also probably going to come with strings as well, right? And so with some of our, we're having a 3-way partnership right now where one of the organizations is providing the physical location, one of the organizations is providing the funding, and we're providing the programming and everything else, right? And so each of the 3 parties has different goals for the partnership. And so it's going to be an adventure to figure out how we take 3 related, similar, but different set of goals to run a successful program. So we're going to have to figure that out.
I'm happy to answer a couple of these lottery questions, unless Sarah or Paige has an objection.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Let me scroll back up here. In no particular order, I know one question was about how current and alumni families factor into the lottery. So they do still get priority. So current students get their first pick of classes for the following year, and then younger siblings or alumni siblings are second tier on that. So our public lottery is still filling just open spots. There are some spots that are already full. We have approximately 70 spots. And it just kind of depends year to year, and how many kids are going off to kindergarten and moving in, et cetera. How many will be filled, but there's usually at least 25 to 30 slots, but there are usually about 200 to 250 applicants for a fairly small number of slots. So that's a big part of why that weighted lottery was important, to make sure we're equitable on that. Few late care and early care questions. We have early care opens half an hour before our program. Late care is 2 hours later. And we do have ratioed staff for that. So 1 to 7 or 2 to 14 staff to children, and then we always have office staff on site as well if need be. And our early and late care, or our early care, excuse me, is the only one where we would have 1 to 7 for a little bit, but they are right next to the classroom. So they're within sight of the other teachers in case anything would come up. Let's see. So the software, as I mentioned, originally was Google Forms and is now Ideal Logic, which are in the links. I do not know what the original thinking was on making 20% of our available offers to folks who qualified for the weighted lottery criteria. I think if we were to try to make it more, again, that would be just a larger school commitment. So for instance, if we wanted to have more children with a referral or such, we would maybe want to lower our staff to student ratio, or try to have an occupational therapist consultant who's really part of our team or in some way, just making sure that that is not just on paper, but that we are doing the holistic approach for supporting children. If we were bringing in more, a higher percentage of children or families with just extra things that they would need for us. And in terms of noticing a difference for applicants, so I believe that Sarah's original presentation, the links for which you have, was talking about some rise in racial diversity within the program. And that is something that we actually need to go back now, having done it for 3 years, and do kind of another study on that. We certainly see quite a bit of diversity within our families, but we also do have places where we could be more diverse. So that is ongoing. I know some folks were talking about location transportation. We unfortunately are not very well located on public transportation. So that is definitely a challenge for us.
Thank you. Thank you for, like I said, all of the thought that you have put into this for years, clearly, and for the time that you took to put this together to share with us today. So appreciate it. Thank you, Sydney, for being so kind. Really, just so much appreciation. I'm just going to share my screen for a second because, like I said earlier, this is a conversation that we definitely want to keep having, this conversation about enrollment, about equity generally, and just about our work as nature-based education professionals. So the call for proposals for our national conference has just opened. So I wanted to just make a little plug to be thinking about whether this could be a venue for you to share what you're doing, what you're thinking about, or open up a conversation to have with others about that. And we will share this recording with everyone. It'll take us a little while to process the recording, and we'll also include all the resources there along with the recording. And just want to remind everyone to please stay connected with us, Natural Start, so we can keep having conversations. This is something that we're thinking about all of the time. And we have just 1 minute left. I wonder if I could turn it over to each of you, Maddie, Sarah, and Paige, just for one last quick closing thought that you'd like to leave everyone with as we think about this going forward. Maddie, you want to go first?
Absolutely. So I am very lucky that I was brought onto a program that already had a lot of this in place. So we've been able to add to it. I definitely applaud people who are doing this from scratch. I know it's very intimidating. I would certainly just, send the words of encouragement that everyone is at different places on making their program more equitable. Any step counts. So even if it is not all the way where you want it to be, just making those steps is going to get us there. So that's always important. And I did redo the links one more time because I had originally sent them just to the hosts, which is not helpful. So they are there.
Oh, and that's a great example of the kind of thing that we can share out with the recording too. So no worries. Thank you, Maddie. I love those closing thoughts. How about Sarah?
Yeah, I learned so much from Paige and Maddie. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think for us, it's just about how do we, we've been tuition-based for a few years, and how do we expand beyond tuition-based? How do we think about grant funding or government funding, and whose responsibility is it really to provide nature-based early education? Is it nonprofits? Is it the government? Is it foundations? Who ultimately should be doing this work or funding this work? Is it me as a white woman? I don't know. So, it's these kind of bigger picture questions of how do we, I feel sometimes trapped in the tuition-based model. So how do we break out of the tuition-based box and think about how else our work could be funded.
Awesome. I love it. And Paige, any last quick thought before we close up?
I just reiterating what everybody said so far. I learned so much from all the presentations today. But I think it is just having the courage to take that first step, even if you don't know the answers, and being resourceful and thinking outside of the box about ways to use the connections and resources that you already have in place. So, but thank you for letting us be part of this.
Well, it's been our pleasure. Thank you all so much. Thanks everyone for being here. And we'll be back in touch with this recording and more webinars coming up. Thanks again.